Welcome to the Brigham Young University Family History Library webinar series. My name is Braden Knutson. I'll be your host for this webinar today. We'd like to thank everybody for joining us on this Tuesday evening for another great webinar. As we go through some of our announcements, we'd like to invite you to participate in some of the polls that we have down at the bottom of the screen. Let us know what topics you'd be interested in hearing about. It always is helpful for our presenters in coming up with ideas. So our next webinar will be on Thursday, October 19th at 6 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, and that webinar is titled Family History Activities with the Family History Guide, and that will be by Bob Taylor. So that'll be a good one. Those are always great webinars, and we hope you can join us again on Thursday. Today, we'll be pleased to hear from Kathryn Grant, who will be giving a presentation titled Taking Advantage of Record Hints on the Family Tree Person page. After years on the sidelines, Kathryn started doing family history and discovered a new passion. Her specialty is mentoring new family historians and helping them find success, and maybe even avoid some of the mistakes she's made. Kathryn teaches Sunday classes at the BYU Family History Library. She also presents at Riverton Saturday seminars and other family history events. Her column on family history ran in the Nauvoo Times for about a year and is still available online. Kathryn works for the LDS Church as a technical writer with a focus on usability and process improvement. Besides family history, she loves uplifting music, thought-provoking books, and homemade guacamole. And as we turn the time over to Kathryn, I'd like to remind you of our questions box on the right-hand side of the screen. Feel free to write in at any time during the presentation, and we'll make sure those are answered by the end. Also, if you would like, at the top of the screen of the presentation box, there's a little button you can click to expand the screen to full screen, so it makes it a little bit easier to see. And we will turn the time over to Kathryn.
Great. Thank you so much, Braden. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. So grateful that you could be with us for this webinar on getting the most from record hints on Family Tree. So let's take a look at what we're going to be covering today. First of all, what are record hints and where do I see them? And then second, how do I attach a record hint? How do I dismiss an incorrect record hint? And then if I dismissed it incorrectly, how do I get it back? And then finally, one of the most exciting aspects of record hints, how to find missing people from Family Tree by using record hints. So what are record hints and where do I see them? Very simply, a record hint is record hints are probable sources from Family Search historical records for a person in Family Tree. So basically the way it works is that Family Tree takes the information on somebody's page and uses that to run a search in historical records. And of course, this is all done behind the scenes. But when you open the page, it displays the results of that search in the form of hints that are very likely about that person whose page you're on. You might be wondering, how accurate are these record hints? And according to Robert Kerr, who is the Senior Product Manager of Search Technologies at Family Search, he says that they are 98.5% accurate. That is really good when you think about it. That means only 1.5% of those hints are not going to be about the person whose page you're on. And that actually matches my experience. Perhaps it matches yours. I'm finding that when I click on those hints, almost all the time, they really are about the person whose page I'm on. There are some things that affect accuracy of those hints that are good to be aware of. The commonality of the name and also the size of the location are factors that affect the accuracy. So for example, if I'm on the person page of somebody named Alexander Entwistle, and he's from tiny little Overdarwin in Lancashire, England, the record hints for him are going to be really accurate because there are not a lot of people with the same name in that same location. On the other hand, if Family Tree is trying to find hints for John Smith in New York, as you can imagine, there's going to be a lot more matches to that are false matches because the name John Smith is very common. So the commonality of the name, the size of location have an effect on the accuracy. Also, interestingly enough, the accuracy of the information on the person page has an impact. Because remember that when Family Tree does that search for record hints, it's using the information on that person page. So for example, if the person page, maybe that person has an incorrect spouse attached, or some incorrect children or something like that, or a wrong birth date. Well, Family Tree doesn't know that that information is incorrect. It assumes the record, the person page is correct. And so it searches for sources that match that person page. So that's why it's so important to do our best to make sure that the information on the person page is accurate, because that will result in the most accurate hints. So where do record hints appear? You've probably seen them over here on the right-hand side of the person page. This box here, the research help box, the record hints section will always display up to 3 hints if they exist. If there's more than 3, there is a way to see them, and that is to click Show Details that appears at the bottom of those record hints. And again, if there are more, they will show up on this detail page. Let's take a look at how record hints appear on any tree view. Now, it's worth noting, important to note, that record hints do not show up in the fan chart, but they do show up on any other tree view, which would be landscape, portrait, and descendancy. So you look for these little blue icons that have the little record symbol on them, and then when you click that icon, you get a flyout that shows you the same 3 hints that you would see if you were on the person page. But you notice here there's no show details. The way you get to see any other record hints, if they exist, is by clicking any of the record hints. And when you do that, you get taken to that same detail page that lists all the existing record hints. Now, if no record hints are available, there will be a message over here that says no pending hints for this person. But what's important to keep in mind about that is just because there's no pending hints right now doesn't mean that there won't be pending hints later on. There's 2 reasons for that, 2 really wonderful reasons. One is that records are constantly being added to Family Search historical records. So uh, if you open this page on a day and you get this message saying that there's no hints, you might come back tomorrow, and if a collection has been added to Family Search historical records that pertains to your ancestor and has a hint about your ancestor, then it's going to show up when you come back the next time. In fact, every time you refresh or reload this page, the hints are refreshed. And so that leads us to another reason why you might see an additional hint that you didn't see before, and that is, suppose that you found a spouse or a child or a more accurate birth date or something and you made that change. Well, when that page is reloaded and the system looks for more hints, because you just added more accurate information, it may show more hints. So how do I attach these wonderful record hints? It's a little bit different depending on whether you're on the person page or whether you're on the tree view. So we're going to walk through both of those to show you how to do that. And it's actually really easy. They've made it really intuitive. So when you see a hint on the person page, the first step is to click the hint. And when you do that, you get this pop-up that gives you a summary of the information on the record that the hint is about. So here I can see that this is from Mary Fraser, and this is the 1881 census. She's female, 28, married, born in 1853. So I'm kind of doing a sanity check saying, does this hint match the information that I already know about her? If it does, if it looks like there's good reason to believe that this source is about your person, then you click Review and Attach. That doesn't attach it immediately, but it gives you a chance to review the record in more detail. So it takes you to this source linker page that you may be familiar with, and it shows the information from the record on the left-hand side so that you can compare it to the person's information in Family Tree that shows up on the right-hand side. So as I look at this, I see that Mary Fraser, born in 1853, is an apparent match to Marianne Rhodes. And as it happens, I know that that's correct because she married a man named Fraser. She was married in this census, so this is her married name. The birth year matches, the birthplace matches. Also, because of course we're limited on the screen, I couldn't show the whole source linker screen, but further on it shows her husband and children further on down the page. So as I look at all that information in detail, I'm able to make a determination as to whether I think this person, or excuse me, whether this record really applies to this person. If I believe that it does, then I add a reason statement. And just as a little side comment, reason statements can be one of the most challenging things for us to write. And we actually have a webinar on the BYU Family History Library site about reason statements. So if you're puzzled about that or would like information, more information on how to write a good reason statement, just go ahead and go to the webinar page and do a search, and you will find the webinar on reason statements. So we put in a reason statement and then we click attach. And what that does is make the hint show up now as a source in the sources section of that person's page. So now let's go ahead and look at how you would attach a hint from the tree view. So here I am on Marianne Rhodes, and I see that the hint icon is here. So I click the hint icon and it gives me this flyout. I go ahead and click the flyout. And now I get a summary page, but it's not quite like the other one. It's not that pop-up, but it still has all the same information. So the information from Family Tree is displayed here at the top, and then the information from the hint or the source, the potential source, is displayed down here at the bottom. And so I do a quick sanity check, and I say, okay, does this pretty much match the information that I already know about this person? And since it does, then I'm going to go ahead and click Review and Attach. And then that takes me back to this same screen. And from here on out, the process is the same. So I just compare the information. If it appears to be a good match, I add a reason statement. I click Attach. And then that source is displayed as a source on the Sources section of the Person page. So what if I get a record hint and it's not right? Because we don't want to be attaching a source, of course, that does not pertain to that person, because that actually will mess up the hinting engine. It makes Family Tree think that that person might be somebody that they're not, and Family Tree would be inclined to find more sources that are incorrect once we attach an incorrect source. So we definitely want to dismiss incorrect record hints. It doesn't happen very often, but on those rare occasions that it happens, here's how you would do it. So I was on James Goodwin's page and I saw this hint for the 81 census, and I was a little puzzled because I had actually already found him in the 81 census. But I thought, okay, I'll take a look and see what this information is and see what I can learn from it, and try to determine what's correct and what's not. Well, as I looked at it, I noticed a lot of anomalies, a lot of things that didn't match information I already knew. For one thing, he'd never lived in Norfolk as far as I knew, and then also his occupation was wrong. My guy was an engine driver, not a fisherman. And my guy was born in Surfleet, Lincolnshire, not Norton, Cheshire. So as I looked at that, I was very confident that this match was not a correct one. So I clicked not a match. And then I get taken to this screen where it tries to, or where it asks me, excuse me, it asks me to explain why I believe this record is not a match. There's detail on this in that webinar that I mentioned, but just for now, what I mainly try to do on these not a match reason statements is list 2 or 3 key items that let me know that these people are not a match. So I start out by saying that James Goodwin, and I give the PID, was born in Surfleet. He was an engine driver, and I say how I know that because it was on his marriage record. And then I say that the James Goodwin in the 1881 census was born in a completely different place in Norton, Cheshire, and that he was a fisherman, not an engine driver. And then also I noted that he had a completely different family in the 1881, so all the kids were different. They didn't at all match this James Goodwin. So once I've explained that, then I click Save, and what that does is make the record hint disappear from the page so that nobody else would be inclined to attach that incorrectly. Doing this from Tree View is very similar. So you go ahead and click the icon and you see the census. When you click that, as we saw earlier, it doesn't give you that pop-up screen, but what it does is give you this summary entry, whatever you'd want to call it, where you can still compare the information. So the family tree information is up here, and the information from the census is down here. And I look at this and I can see very clearly that this doesn't match my James Goodwin. So I click not a match and I fill out the reason statement and then I click save and it takes it away as a hint. Well, that naturally raises the question of what you do if you accidentally dismiss a hint and then you realize that you shouldn't have. And this happened to me a few months back where I was researching in someone in England, and as far as I knew, they had never left England. Well, the record hint was for somebody, and I actually don't remember now, it might have been the United States or Canada, but it was someplace overseas. And so I thought, oh, that can't possibly be for my person, so I dismissed the record hint. Well, come to find out, after I did a little more research, they emigrated, and so that hint really was for them. So I dismissed it incorrectly, and I needed to get it back. So here is how you can show dismissed hints and how you can get them back if you dismiss them incorrectly, or also, since Family Tree is an open edit system, somebody else might have accidentally dismissed a hint incorrectly. So here's how you can review those hints and see if they should perhaps be restored. So it's different from a person page than it is from Tree View. If you're on a person page, you click Show Details. If you're in one of the tree views, then you click any one of the records, and that takes you to that detail screen. On the detail screen, the default is to see the regular hints that have not been dismissed. But right next to that, you see a button or a link for dismissed hints. So when you click that, you see a list of all the hints that have been dismissed. And so in this case, the options are a little bit different than if you're on the Hint tab. The options are either to review and attach or to say that it might be a match. And so if you have looked at the source and you're absolutely sure that it applies to your person, then you go ahead and click Review and Attach, and it takes you to the source linker page where you can attach it. On the other hand, if you're not absolutely positive, but you have good reason to think that at least it shouldn't have been dismissed, then you click Maybe a Match, and what that does is put the hint back in the box on the person page or on the flyout on the tree page. So now we come to actually what I think is one of the most exciting parts about record hints, and that is how you can use them to find people who are missing from Family Tree and who need to be added. So as you probably know from looking at sources, records are very rarely only about one person. Almost always they mention other family members, parents, children, spouses, sometimes nieces and nephews, in-laws. But they almost never just mention one person. So sources and records are a great way to find people that you maybe didn't know about before and that are missing from Family Tree. They may also mention possible relatives, so the record may not provide proof that they're relatives, but you may have a reason to believe that they are, such as witnesses on a marriage record. They might have the same last name as the bride or the groom, and you may not recognize them other than the last name is the same. So that's somebody worth checking into to see if that's maybe a parent or a grandparent that you hadn't known about. Also, in census records, often lodgers or boarders turn up to be relatives, cousins or nephews or whatever, and for whatever reason, they didn't say the relationship, they just said that they were a lodger or boarder, but they're worth checking into. So here's an example of how record hints helped me find some people that were missing from Arthur Goodwin. So you see in Family Tree, Arthur has no spouse or children, and he's actually the son of James Goodwin that we were looking at before. So I look at these record hints and I see that we've got a hint for the 1901 census and the 1911, and at the time, Arthur would have been old enough to have a family. So I definitely want to check out these record hints. Well, look what happened. When I looked at this record hint, I was delighted to see that a wife and a son were listed. But here's a precaution. You might be tempted to just say, oh, wow, this is great. I'm just going to go ahead and really quickly add all these people on this record to Family Tree. There are a couple of reasons why you might not want to do that. First of all, let's look at Annie. As you probably know, women are supposed to be listed by their maiden or birth name in Family Tree, and that's actually a kind of a family history rule all over the place, at least for women whose names change when they get married. That if we look for her in Family Tree under the name Goodwin, probably they're not going to find any duplicates because we actually don't know her maiden name. So, um, shoot, I was going to say something else about this and now it just went out of my mind. Hopefully it'll come back. So the duplicates, any duplicates in the system are most likely going to be under her maiden name. I have seen people marry somebody with their same last name, but that is so rare that it's pretty safe to assume that her maiden name is not Goodwin. And then we look at Arthur and we notice that he was just born a few years ago. So he's only about 2 years old at this time. So we don't know whether Arthur lived to be past 8. And the reason that's significant is that we don't know whether he needs all his ordinances. One reason that this is a concern is that if you add him right now without knowing whether he needs all his ordinances, then we've mentioned in another webinar that there's a lot of name finding going on using automated apps. And I've mentioned the time that I had just made a name ready and in 3 minutes somebody else had picked it up. And the problem is not really that someone else picked it up. You know, we're okay with sharing names, but the problem is that the research was not complete. Whoops, let me go back here. The problem is that the research isn't complete, and oftentimes people who are doing name finding with name finding apps don't do research on the names. They just turn the names right over to the temple or they print them immediately. And so in this case, we don't want that to happen because we haven't proven whether Arthur really needs all his ordinances. So that's actually another reason why you would not want to add the person from here without doing more research, determining whether they died before 8 and knowing that you have all that information. And I just remembered the other thing that I was going to mention about when you're adding people from here. When you click add, Family Search or Family Tree, excuse me, does a search to see if there's any duplicates, but it doesn't let you edit the search. So if I were to click add right now, Family Tree would run a duplicate search using the name Annie Goodwin and using this birth year and whatever birth information was on the census record. And if it didn't find any duplicates, it would add her as a person without giving you the chance to do a different search. And in this case, we're fairly certain that her last name is Goodwin, so that search would not be accurate. So another reason not to do the search, or excuse me, not to do the add right away, is that we want to check out that other 1911 census and see if it's got any other information. Well, we're in luck here. We see that Arthur is still with the family. He's still at home, and he's now about 12. So we know that he lived past 8. So that gave us the information that we needed to know if he needs his full set of ordinances. But there are some other cautions now that we're looking at this 1911 census. One is that, do you remember what the wife's name was before? Her name was Annie. So is this a second wife? Or I've also seen sometimes that women go by a first name in one census and then they change for whatever reason to their middle name in the next census. But I have enough information on the family to know they're the same person. For instance, a marriage record, and I know they've been married for X number of years or whatever. And so, at least for now, I know that I've got to do some checking on this to determine whether this is a second wife or the first wife going by a different name. Not only that, now we've got a list of 5 children. Which children go with which wife, if or which mother, if there were indeed 2 wives. So we want to be sure that we're attaching the children to the right set of parents. And then finally, we've also got the same issue that we had with Arthur on the last census, and that is to determine whether these children lived past 8. So record hints can provide great clues, but I normally don't recommend adding right from the source linker page unless you've already done the research to know what the accurate information is. In this case, we want to check marriage records for the wife's name, possibly 2 wives. We want to check birth records to determine which children go with which mother, if there were 2 mothers. And then also check death records and other records to verify whether those children died before age 8. So record hints can provide wonderful clues. That just made it so much easier for me to find out what I need to do to add Arthur's wife and children to family tree so that their temple work can be done. So that brings us to the end of our webinar, and as a summary, we looked at what record hints are, which they're sources from Family Search Historical Records. We saw that you could see them both on the person page and on the tree view. We talked about how to attach a record hint as a source from both of those places, how to dismiss an incorrect hint, how to get an incorrect hint back, and then also how to use record hints to add people who are missing from Family Tree. So thank you so much for coming to this webinar today. And Braden, do we have any questions?
I don't see any questions at the moment, but if there are any questions, feel free to write them into the chat box now, and we'll make sure we get those answered before we finish. Do you have anything else you'd like to add, Kathryn?
Nope, I think that's it. Thank you.
All right. We'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. This has been another wonderful webinar, and we would like to remind you that this webinar is being recorded and posted onto our YouTube channel, so if you'd like to come back and watch later, or if you have some friends that you know of that weren't able to watch the live session, let them know, and they'll be able to watch the recorded version. Also follow us on our social media feeds on Twitter and Facebook to stay updated with the latest news coming from the BYU Family History Library webinar series. And as always, we always appreciate your feedback to all of our webinars, and we hope you have a great day.